In this quick video tutorial, I'm going to walk through how to load data stored in a CSV file into a data frame in R using the here function from the here package and the read.csv function, which is part of base R. To follow along with the tutorial, I'm going to assume that you already have R and RStudio installed and running on your computer. In addition, I'm going to assume that you have an R project created and loaded. You can tell if you're working within an R project by looking in the upper right of your RStudio session, and if you see the name of a project there. If you don't have an R project loaded, it will simply say project none. Finally, I'm going to expect that you have a subfolder called data, lowercase data, within the base directory of your R project. And within that data directory, you have a file called week_03_practice_data.csv. That has the example data that we're going to use for this demo. So now to get started, let's navigate back to our base directory of our R project here in the Files window. Our basic objective here is to load data that we have stored in that week 3 demo file. So the first thing that we need to do is figure out the syntax that we can type to load that file. So let's try the first and most obvious thing. Let's just try using the read.csv function and then the name of the file in quotes. And let's remind ourselves what that file name was. Let's look in the data subfolder. It is called week03 practice data.csv. And I'm just going to run this line of code and see what happens. So note, it did not work. Instead, I got an error that says cannot open the connection. Cannot open file week3 practice data.csv. No such file or directory. Decoding this error into plain English, R is simply telling us that given the information that we input into read.csv, it's not able to find our week 3 practice data file. So what are our options? One option is that we could set our working directory to the data subdirectory within our base project. So let's try that option first. To do that, we can use the setwd, which stands for set working directory, and we're going to set it to data because we know that that is the subfolder of our R project. And we can look down here just at the top of the console window and see that our current working directory is pointing to cgit intro to quant equal. That happens to be the demo R project that I have open for this. So I'm going to run this line of code, setwd data, and notice here it changed the working directory, so now we're in a subdirectory called data. So now let's try to read this data file again. I'm going to rerun line 2, and notice that it looks like we were successful because it read all of this information into a data frame and printed the contents of the data frame out onto the screen. That option worked for us. We were able to read in the data file. Now suppose we have a different data file we want to read and it's in a different directory. Let's assume that this other file we want to read is in a subdirectory of our main folder and it's called week01. And the particular file is called week1dat.csv. So you might think that one reasonable way to do this would be to use setwd again. And this time we know that we are in a week_01 folder. So let's just try typing that. Week01. And let's run this line of code and see if that changes our working directory. And no, it did not. So it says, cannot change working directory with an error. That's our code. That is R's way of saying that it couldn't find a directory called week01. But that seems weird because we can see right here we have a directory called week01. But you remember that whenever R is trying to interact with the file system, it's going to look for files and directories relative to its current working directory. And as we can see right here, R's current working directory is that data subfolder of our main project directory. Since our other data file is in a different subdirectory of our main folder, we have to do some other kind of strategy to find that folder. So one option, again, is we could use setwd, and we could use a special symbol of ... and that tells our file system that we want to go back one level. So I can run this, and look, it took us back to our intro to quant eCall directory here, and that's our base directory for our R project. And then we could use setwd again, and this time we want to go to week 1, and we'll see if it works this time. And it did work, and again we can see here our current working directory is now week 01. So let's try to open this file that we're interested in reading. And the name of the file is week1dat.csv. week1dat.csv. And I run the code, and it read the data and it printed it out to the console window. So we had success. We've been able to read 2 different data files here. So now suppose I need to reread the week 3 practice data.csv. Well, I would have to go through this whole tedious process of running setwd with the double dots again, and then setwd back to data, and then finally I could read the week 3 practice data file again. But that's kind of a lot of work, and you can imagine that this process is very error prone. So next I'm going to show you a handy package and function that you can use in R to help you interact with your files in a much simpler way, in a way that's much less error prone. The technique that we're going to use is using the function called here from the package here. So the first thing we want to do is we might review our notes, since we've already had some experience in the class with installing packages using the install.packages command, and let's do the same thing here. Install.packages, and the name of the package is here, H-E-R-E, just like the regular English word. So I will run this line of code. R is going to think it's going to give me some messages showing that it is installing the package. If all is well, I will get a message that said the downloaded binary packages are in, and then it'll give me some kind of a location in the file system. So we also know that when we want to use a package that we've installed, we have to load it in so that it's available to R, and we can use the require function to do that. And the name of our package was here. So we'll run this line of code, and now we have access to all of the functions that are inside of the here package. The only function that we're really interested in the here package is the function that's also called here. So let's see what happens when we run the here function. Now I'm going to run this line and take a look at the output in your console window. Notice that it says on my computer, C get intro to quant eCall. Well, that should seem familiar because that's just our base directory for our R project. So it looks like what the here function is going to do is give us a link to our R project base folder. Notice that our current working directory is actually the data subfolder there, but here is returning our base directory for our R project. So now suppose we wanted to use here to retrieve something from the data directory. Well, the syntax is really simple. We just type here, and then we put the names of the subdirectories that we want to look into in order. So here we're just going to look in a single subdirectory. It's called data, and I'll run this line, and it shows the absolute path on my computer to the data subfolder of our main R project folder. So now let's look at the syntax for how we would actually retrieve the file name. So to review, the file that we're interested in within the data subfolder is called week 3 practice data.csv. So to find that entire file name, I'm going to type here the name of my subdirectory, which is data. This is telling R to look inside of a folder called data. Then I'm going to type the file name, week 03 practice data.csv. So when I run this, the output is just going to be the absolute path that I've specified to here. So I told it I wanted to look in a subfolder called data, and I see that right here. And then within that subfolder, it's going to look for a file called week3practicedata.csv, and that's indicated here. One quick and easy trick that you can use to tell if you have the correct file name is to use the file.exists function. And I'm just going to paste this entire call to here inside of that function, and it's a quick reality check to tell you if the file that you're looking for actually exists. And I run the function and it tells me true, so that tells me that by using here along with the arguments data and the name of the file, it's had success in finding this file. So now let's try to nest this call to here inside of read.csv. So our outside function is going to be read.csv, and I'm just going to, since we know that R was able to find this file when we used the file.exists function, I'm going to paste the entire thing inside of read.csv. And again, it worked. So we did this and we never had to mess with our working directory at all. In fact, our working directory is already pointing to this data subfolder, but we simply used here instead of the setwd function to specify that our data file was within the data subfolder. So now let's go back and try to accomplish our second task, and that was to read a different data file that was in a different subdirectory. So again, we'll read the read.csv function. We're going to use here. Only this time, we're not looking within our data subdirectory. We're looking within our week01 subdirectory. So instead of data, I'm going to type week01, comma, and then I'm going to put the name of the file, and I need to remind myself what that was called. It's called week1dat.csv. So if I've typed this all correctly, I should be able to run the code and read in the data frame, and it looked like it worked. So let's compare what we've done so far. We knew that we needed to read data from two separate files and that they were in different directories. The first thing that we tried to do was simply naively use the read.csv function to read in our first data file, and it didn't work. So we found that we had to set the working directory to our subfolder data. We knew that the other file we wanted to read was in a subfolder called week1, and so to do that, we had to use setwd twice. We had to use this special symbol to go back one level, and then we had to use setwd again to go navigate into the week01 folder. And then finally, we were able to read week1dats.csv. But that was all pretty painful and relatively error-prone, I hope you can imagine. So it was much easier when we used the here function because it didn't matter where our current working directory was pointed to. We simply used the here function, knowing that here always looks relative. It always looks for files relative to our R project base directory.